The second useful thing to note that actually builds on the factorial notation is this idea of the binomial coefficient. Now, the binomial coefficient is written in mathematical terms technically as this thing called a 2-by-1 matrix, i.e. it looks something like this. We have a very tall bracket and an n and an r separate from each other. Note this is not the same as n divided by r. This is an entirely separate thing, so make sure you don't put a division symbol between the n and the r. Now, pretty much what this means is out of n possible objects, in how many unique ways can we pick r of them at a time? Now, the formula for this is fairly straightforward. It's also in the log tables. The number of ways this can happen, sort of schematically, is the number of possible ways to rearrange those objects to begin with, divided by the amount of objects you're going to be taking from the sample, and the number of ways you can do that, but also multiplied by n minus r factorial. So we will actually revisit this in slightly more detail when we get to probability and this thing called Bernoulli trials. So I'm only really explaining this sort of schematically. So the sort of formal way to calculate these NR binomial coefficients, which by the way is read as n choose r. Again, it'll make sense when we get to probability, but pretty much the formal way to do this is to substitute into this formula and use these sort of definitions of factorials to get this cancelling in some way. However, you can actually use your calculator for this. So most calculators, particularly on this Casio calculator, have it in a different section. So this is a slightly older one, so the menus that I'm going to be selecting are going to be different depending on the calculator. But at least for me, how I get this is, firstly, if I want to calculate, say, 9 choose 4, I'll start with that. Then what I do is I type 9. Then where I have it on my calculator, the next thing I would do is shift. I know in some calculators it's labeled as second F or second for function. But on mine is just shift. So it's shift and then the division symbol. And what will come up is a C, but kind of this bit is a little bit bolded. That's to indicate the sort of choose function. And then you type the second number, which in our case is 4. And if your calculator spits out 126, then you've done something correctly. So the reason I'm introducing this now and not necessarily in probability is for its name, the binomial coefficient, and I will explain why this is particularly useful in the next video.